Record better audio anywhere with Motive digital microphones from Shure. Easy-to-use options like the MV88 plug directly into your phone or computer and include a free app. Create studio-quality sound for podcasts, music, and videos. Visit Shure.com to learn more.
Blog Talk Radio.
Are you looking for an all-natural solution to skincare? Try Simply Ceta all-natural skincare products. Coconut oil locks in moisture with nature's finest organic solution. Rich with vitamin E and rejuvenating proteins, it can help with enhancing skin nourishment for wrinkles, skin damage, tissue repair, and more. Simply Ceta skincare line includes Simply Ceta coconut oil, Simply Ceta bath salts, and Simply Ceta bath gel. Get healthier-looking skin today. Order all three today for $40 at www.simplyceta.com. And I know for a fact that it helps with diabetic edema. My husband has edema on both of his legs. He is insulin dependent, and he also has very dry skin on his feet and toes, and it has made a world of difference. You definitely want to go to www.simplyceta.com and order her products today. They do not have any unnatural ingredients or any preservatives. It is all simply coconut oil with maybe a little jasmine. Order it today. Are you looking for a website creator that will make your website stand out above the herd? Are you looking for someone that knows your needs and can create a website that is not only eye-catching, but one that will stay with the customer as they scroll through the net? If so, contact Wellhaven and Associates. Lourdes Wellhaven has the magic touch when it comes to websites. You give her an idea and let her run with it, and she will create something beautiful. If you don't believe me, check out author Yvonne Mason at .com and see what she has done for me. And here's the great thing. If you contact her and give her my name, she'll give you $100 off. So don't wait. Don't delay. Call today or go online and look up Wellhaven and Associates and send her an email and tell her what you need. She will get back with you promptly.
The year, 1888. The place, London's East End. Dead and mutilated bodies are popping up all over, from Stamford to Whitechapel. Jack the Ripper is leaving his mark, and the city's on edge. Yvonne Mason is back with a tale of murder and millinery. The Rhodes Hat Factory is booming while the body count rises. Why now? How are these hats connected? Has the Hatter gone mad? Mad Hatter from Yvonne Mason. Available now on Amazon.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages. I am your host, Yvonne Mason, and once again, yes, we are off the chain. Those of you who have listened to my shows before now know that anything and everything might be said, and my guests are as eclectic as I am, and tonight is no different. If tonight is your first night of listening to my show, welcome. My guest tonight is Mr. Armand Rosamilia. He is a New Jersey boy who currently is living in sunny Florida. I guess he got tired of the snow, where he writes when he's not sleeping. He's happily married to a woman who helps his career and is supportive, which is all he ever wanted in life. We must talk. He's written over 150 stories that are currently available, including horror, zombies, contemporary fiction, thrillers, and, ladies and gentlemen, so much more. His goal is to write a good story and not worry about genre labels. This is a man after my own heart. He runs two very successful podcasts on Project iRadio, too. Armcast, Dead Sexy Horror Podcast, where he interviews fellow authors as well as filmmakers, musicians, and whoever else happens to be along. Then he also has Armand Tufo Dead Time Podcast with co-host Mark Tufo. The duo interview authors and filmmakers and anyone else they feel like talking to. He also likes to talk to himself or talk to people in third person because he's really, really cool like that. You can find him at ArmandRosamilia.com, and I hope I'm not massacring his last name. for not only his latest releases, but interviews and guest posts with other authors that he likes. And I, ladies and gentlemen, am very honored that he likes me and agreed to be on my show. So welcome, Armand, and please forgive me if I massacred your last name.
No, actually, you got it right, and that doesn't normally happen, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on, and let's talk. Just us and 20 million other lovely people. What shall we go with first? Shall we go with your podcast first, or shall we go with your books first, or shall we go with your post on your blog first?
I will let you take the lead, whatever you want to talk about first.
Okay. The first thing that I want to talk about is Green River Blend. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am reading this book. I have not finished it, but I am reading this book, and I have to tell you, this is one of the most amazing, interesting, scary books I have ever read. I write horror, and I write suspense, and I write crime fiction, and I drink a lot of coffee. You take all of those combinations, and Armand puts them in a book, and you have an entire town that is hyped up on coffee, committing nefarious acts. Now, Armand, you told me, but explain to the audience, what is the word I'm looking for? What was the idea for this book, the inspiration for this wonderful little book?
Well, I guess it's basically what you just said. I mean, I'm like you. I write all different, I write a lot of horrific things, and I'm totally addicted to coffee. That is my one vice. And probably about 3 years ago or so, I was kind of searching around for something to write on my own. I was doing a lot of Hollywood tie-in stuff, like little B-movie stuff that I was writing, and I wanted to write something on my own. And it was kind of one of those movie moments where I had the cup of coffee in my hand, and I'm sipping it, and I'm staring at a blank page going, what can I write about? What can I write about? And then I looked down and I said, coffee. How can I do anything with coffee and horror? And it literally, probably about 4 of those characters that you're reading just hit me all at once of different things that what if this nefarious coffee could make you do things or heighten certain bad vices, tendencies that you had already that, it would kind of pull those out. So that was kind of the idea, and I just started writing it, and I had submitted it to a couple of publishers who, one publisher really liked it, but they had no idea how to market it. Was it a supernatural thriller? Was it a horror book? What to do with it. And then Devil Dog Press loved it, and she grabbed it right away, but she said, this is going to be a trilogy, right? And I said, yes. So that was, we kind of signed the contract as a 3-book deal on it because she loved it so much.
Well, I have to tell you, I can't lay down and go to sleep at night unless I've read some of that book, because it just grabbed me and pulled me right in at the prologue, because I'm going, where is he going with this? How do you make it? Well, you're welcome. And for me to get pulled into something like that, it really has to grab me, because most of the time horror and suspense bores me because it's the same old plot line. It's the same old whodunit. Not this, because you're criminal.
Well, I wanted to do. I wanted to do like a bunch of characters. I wanted to do like that ensemble cast if it was a movie or if it was a TV series or something. I wanted you to not know who was the main character or just follow just that one person. And I wanted it to be the overarch of, what's going on with this strange coffee shop and this Green River Blend coffee that's making people do things. So that was kind of the idea right from the beginning. I knew I wasn't just going to tell one linear storyline, one main character that you kind of follow through. I mean, there's a few in there, and once you get towards the end and it shakes out, you kind of understand who you've been following. but I didn't want it right from the beginning for you to just know, okay, we're just going to follow this guy or this girl or whatever right to the end of the book.
And ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, there's so many within the plot, and there are so many twists and turns, and out of the blue, you get slapped with something else, and you go, what? No, he didn't, but he did. And that's what I love about it is I don't know where this story is going to take me, but I know that when I get to the end of it, I'm going to be ready for Green River Blend 2, so it is coming out shortly, correct?
Yes, actually, this month I will finish the first draft of it, and then it goes to editors and betas and all that. And Devil Dog Press, in fact, we just talked today about it. It will be an October release, and she was going to work on I guess she's working on whoever does the cover will do the cover for it. I'll start seeing some ideas for that very soon. So I'm excited about that. And then the third book will probably be out in February or March of 2017 at this point. So I'm going to jump right into the third one.
I got to wait.
Yeah, I got to write them first.
Get busy. Get off the phone now and get busy. Because these are characters that you love to hate.
Yeah.
When you think about it, I found, like you say, you bring out the deepest, darkest fantasies of some of these people. And some of the things they do, you're going, would anybody really do that? But what we see in the news today, yeah, they would and they do.
Yeah, that's the sad part. Not a lot of, you too, as a horror author, unfortunately, we're not making stuff up off the top of our heads. We're probably pulling from a news item or something that we've seen that actually happens in real life. That's the most horrific stuff. And
it stays in the back of our mind, which is even more scary.
Yeah.
I don't know, some of this stuff, like down in South Florida, down below us, down in Martin County, there was a crime that just happened. Now, this would be something out of your Green River Blend. There were 2 people murdered. The woman was found in the garage. The man was found in the driveway, and the neighbors calling the police saying, this guy's eating the dead man's face off.
Yeah.
And it was a kid that had gone to FSU that was high on Flocka that had murdered this man and woman and was eating, literally cannibalizing the victim.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is, the news story down in Miami there, I guess it was 6 years ago or so, that story really got me started doing Hollywood stuff because a company said, hey, we want to do this series like a thrillers, like spy thrillers called Miami Spy Games. The book was called Russian Zombie Gun, and I did it as a 12-part serialized thing, and it was based on it was based on that incident, and it was also based on the technology that the Russians have and stuff. And the people behind it that I worked with on this book were all ex-military with access to a lot of really crazy stuff that I was allowed to, read this, but it'll disappear in 24 hours and you can't copy anything, and access to a lot of crazy stuff that's really going on in the world. And it scared the heck out of me, but I wrote a book based on it, and I remembered a lot of that stuff as I go forward. I took some notes on other stuff that maybe I didn't use in the book, but I know that's really out there, which is scary.
Yeah, we can't make this stuff up, ladies and gentlemen. It is out there. Tell me about Dirty Deeds. I know you've got Dirty Deeds and Dirty Deeds 2 out. Tell me about those two.
Yep, Dirty Deeds 2 actually came out yesterday. It debuted. Dirty Deeds was my first shot at a crime thriller that was more. I wanted to write something that was more mass market appeal. So when I originally started the book, it was very dark. It was a horror book more than a crime thriller. It was about, the original concept was about a guy who gets paid to kill children. And that was kind of the idea in my head, and I said, wow, that's even too dark for me. And then when I started playing with it, I said, well, what if he doesn't actually kill the children? What if he really, the people who are paying him to kill the children, it could be a senator, it could be a rock star, it could be, basically people with money are giving him a lot of money. Hey, I need this child kidnapped. Maybe it's an athlete, and he gets a stripper pregnant, and she has a baby, and she's trying to blackmail him. So this guy goes in and basically kidnaps the baby, and the baby disappears, and they think the baby's dead. In reality, he's moving that child on to a better, another family, and hopefully, to a better life. And that's kind of the idea behind it. And when I finished the book, I submitted it to Kindle Scout, and I said, let me give it a shot first, and then maybe I'll self-publish or whatever. And Kindle Scout took it; they loved it, and it came out in February or right at the end of January. And I learned a lot from that program, from doing 30 days in the program, and then from the editors. They gave me a ton of feedback. And my main editor loved it. She said, "This is like this. We're gonna market this to Janet Ivanovich fans." And I had never read any of her stuff, but my wife had, and she said, "You know what?" My wife had read the book, and she said, "You know what? That is a definite because it's a first person. It's a guy who's in his mid-40s, who's kind of at the end of his career doing this. He's getting fat. He's getting tired. He has a 19-year-old." Assistant, and she wants to take over the business, kind of thing, and the main idea is that one of the children 20 years ago that he rescued is supposed to be dead. This mob boss's kid, all of a sudden he reappears on the radar, and now the main character James Gaffney is like, holy crap, now they realize that I didn't do it. So yeah. So that's kind of that was the thing, and it was I learned a lot from that. I decided not to go with Kindle Press for the second one because I wanted these to come out every 6 months, and I wanted to control that more. And I think they would be willing to do it about once a year. And I just thought this was a series, 55,000 word books. That's a nice, easy read. There's no profanity in it. There's no over-the-top violence. There's no sexual things. It's a mass market thing, and that was really how I wanted to write it. So the second one just came out, and I'm getting a ton of great reviews from it already, and people are dying because the first one ends on a cliffhanger, which people don't like. So now at least you get to read the second one.
Well, tell me about Dying Day 6.
Dying Day 6 came out in June, and every year, for the last 5 years, in June I've done a Summer of Zombie blog tour, and it's always me and usually 4 or 5 other authors, zombie authors with new books out in June. And last year, not this year that just passed, but the year before, I think I had like 50 different authors, and it just got crazy. So I always put out a Dying Days book in June. I've done that every year. And so that was kind of June for me. June and November are my 2 slowest sales months. So in November I do a Winter Zombie tour, which is the same thing, and I'll put out a Dying Days book then as well. And it just continues the series. I mean, the series right now is going to be 9 books. 6 just came out. The covers, I had Jack Wallen do all the covers for it. I redid all the covers, and basically when you put all 9 covers together, it's one picture of an overhead shot of a beach scene with zombies and blood in the water. And I really, when I gave him the concept, he really nailed it. So I'm really happy with that. And it's Darlene Bobbitt. It's just continuing her story, which is very brutal. I mean, everybody who reads the series says the worst people are the survivors, not the zombies.
And that's usually the case. Survivors are, in any apocalyptic adventure, the survivors are usually the worst people around.
Exactly.
What about United States of Apocalypse?
That was a fun one. Also, Devil Dog Press put that one out. me and Mark Tufo kind of got our starts at the same time doing zombie stuff. He does a extremely successful zombie Fallout series, and he was doing a ton of different contracts and stuff. And basically, someone came to him and said, "Hey, would you do an apocalyptic book? No zombies, but using your main character, Mike Talbot." And his wife got the idea. Well, wait a minute. Why don't you write something with Armand together? And so we combined Darlene Bobbage from the Dying Day series with Mike Talbot from his Zombie Fallout series in an alternate reality where it's kind of like the beginning of World War III. They've detonated the bad guys have detonated a bomb in middle of the country, and we're under attack. And Darlene is on the West Coast, and Mike is on the East Coast, and so we both wrote alternate chapters with our character, and it's phenomenal. We got an Audible deal out of it, so when it came out, it was released on Audible, which was awesome. And then we're already looking at probably doing a second one soon as we can get around to it, and we'll probably go back to Audible on that as well, and get a nice advance again, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, that money's always nice.
Yeah, money's
the
always
enemy,
good.
Yeah, the enemy held near.
That was another one I co-wrote with somebody, and also Devil Dog Press put it out. Jay Wilburn has been a long-time friend and such a good writer. We've worked on other stuff together. We worked on the Hellmouth trilogy. Me, him, Jack Wallen, and Brent Abel. We did like a really funny horror comedy thing with the Hellmouth trilogy. So me and Jay go to a lot of conventions together. I think we've been to about 5 or 6 of them together, shared a table, and a lot of times share a room. And at one of those last year, he just said, "Hey, I have this idea for a haunted house story." And it would be about be more about the characters and divorce and separation and kids and all that dynamic. And then you throw that into a haunted house situation, a very scary haunted house situation. And I said, yeah, I would love to work with you on that. And we knocked that book off pretty quick. And we're very proud of it. It's probably the most fun I've had co-writing with somebody, and I've written with a lot of other people. And it was also probably the book I'm most proud of because The Enemy Held Near was really, for the people who have read it, they really get the characters. They love the family. They love the dynamic. And it's really hard for people to figure out which chapter I wrote or which chapter Jay wrote, which I think is pretty good too.
Yeah, that is a sign of excellent writing, because if you can do that, it moves seamlessly through the entire book.
Yeah, somebody had made a comment that they it's a ghost story, it's a haunted house book set in Atlanta, and so they got it and they read it, and then after they read it, they said they realized that 2 of us had written it, which I thought was pretty cool.
I like that. I love sometimes I like fooling our reading public. Tell me about the Flagler Beach fiction series.
That was a cool one to write. That was several years ago. We had moved, and my son was still going to high school in Palm Coast, Flagler Beach area in Florida, and I was down near Daytona, so it was about half an hour drive. So instead of moving him schools, I said, you know what, I'll just drive you every day, because I've been writing full-time at that point for a few years. So what I would do is I would drop him off at high school, then I would go to Flagler Beach to Kokomo's Cafe, and I would sit in their corner, and I would drink coffee all day, and I would have lunch, and I would write. And I started eavesdropping on the conversations, because I'm a writer, and we all do that. We all listen in on everything. And I heard a conversation of a woman and a man who were probably in their mid-60s, and she was breaking up with him at the table next to me. And she was just so mean to this guy. And, basically, I don't want your kids now. I'm guessing his kids were probably my age. I don't want your kids. I don't want your grandkids at my house anymore. And she just basically said, this is over. Somebody stole I'm missing plates from my house. I know your kids stole my plates. And the guy got up, and he looked like he was going to cry, and basically she said, well, you need to pay for this. And he took out a $20 bill, and he put it on the table, and he left. And she had the biggest smile on her face, and she just finished her meal. And I thought, I'm going to kill her in one of my stories, you know. And then as I really started thinking, I'm like, you know what? Just that story itself would be good. So I wrote, it basically would end up being a 7-book contemporary fiction series, like a beach reads. And I set it in 7 different actual places down in Flagler Beach, and that I was familiar with the owners, and I made up fictionalized versions of them and customers and different things. And there's characters that run from one book to the next. And what's neat about it is in there's two guys who work for the Family, which is a New Jersey mob, Marco and Chaz. And Marco is hitting on this blonde that he sees, Shell, who wants nothing to do with him. And it kind of strung through the whole thing of he's looking for her, he wants to meet her, he wants to date her. And the Family, the whole thing, the boss there is Chenzo, which is based on a not based, but I use the real name of a friend that I know that hangs out in Flagler, in Kokomo's.
Mm-hmm.
So for Dirty Deeds 2, I actually used those characters as part of the book, and I mixed them into the Dirty Deeds series, Chaz and Chenzo and Marco and Shell and everything. So that was a lot of fun. I like to do that. I like to use different characters cameo in other ones of my stories. I do that a lot. And for the readers, they love it because then they're reading through and they're like, wait a minute, I remember that character from Keep Her Cthulhu or Flagler, one of the Flagler Beach books or whatever. So it was just a fun beach read type of thing. There's no real, there's no horror or anything, but I do have a lot of my characters from other books cameo throughout those 7 books.
I have to get those for sure. Tell me about Chelsea Avenue, because I have that one downloaded, and I'm going to read it after I finish Green River Blend.
Chelsea Avenue is probably as closest to Green River Blend as far as that supernatural thriller type of book. And that book took me many years, a lot of false starts on it, because, again, it's a bigger book idea-wise. It's set on, I'm from New Jersey originally, and back in June of 1987, we had the Haunted House Pier, which is a real place. It was like, it was a haunted house on a pier, and it burned down. And around the corner from there was a club called Murphy's Law, which was a real club. I used to go to it when I was in high school and in my 20s and see metal bands and hang out with my friends, and it eventually closed down. But in Chelsea Avenue, in my story, the Haunted House Pier burns down, and Murphy's Law burns down at the same time. And so every year on that date, it takes you through, basically every chapter goes through the next year and where the survivors are, and there's basically an elemental creature that is trapped in the vacant lot that was Murphy's Law, and his power grows on the anniversary every year, and he calls one or two of the survivors back and kills them, and his power grows every year. So that's kind of, I think it goes through about 13 or 14 years of that, and it's set in Long Branch, New Jersey, which is near where I grew up. There's a lot of characters in there that are based on actual people that I grew up with. So there's a lot of high school friends, and the main character female is Tammy Kelly, and actually that's a girl that I've known since kindergarten. So it was a lot of fun writing her character and her into the story, and taking some liberties with it, obviously.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Off the Chain, and I am your host, Yvonne Mason, and my guest tonight is author and radio host Armand Rosamilia, and we have been talking about all of his wonderful, wonderful books that he has written, and now he's going to make me wait for the second and third book of Green River Blend. I just hate when they do that. You and R.R. Martin. Let's talk a little bit about your two podcasts. How long have you been podcasting? How did you get into it? And the people that you talk to, and all that kind of stuff.
I've been before I did podcasting, I had been on down in Flagler Beach. I had been on an AM radio station, The Surf, which became an FM station, and I was doing Friday nights. I was doing a 2-hour writer called Friday Night Writes with another author down there. And what we would do is we would interview some of the local writers that would come into this actual studio and hang out. And then I would do a heavy metal show for an hour after. The problem was I was getting out of there at midnight on a Friday, and I was tired. my eyes hurt, and I started getting night blindness. So I said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And I had listened to a ton of podcasts. I said, well, maybe I can do this. So I got the equipment, and I started doing it on my own and just doing interviews. And then Project iRadio, which is a network of about 15 or 16 different podcasts, I started talking with them, and they said, we'd love to have you over here. We'd love to have you actually do a couple of different podcasts. So I've been doing it for over 2 years now. I think this week will be episode 116, and I've interviewed 2 interviews a week. I do about half an hour interviews with each person. So I've been doing that for about 2 years, and we just wrapped up. That's Armcast, Dead Sexy Horror Podcast, and we just wrapped up. We did over a year of Armand Tufo's Dead Time Podcast with Mark Tufo. We put that one on hiatus because we were both busy doing other things, but because I'm a lunatic and I have to keep busy, I immediately jumped in and signed on to do one for September. So September 7th will be the first episode, and it's called The Mondo Method Podcast. And I'll have newbie author, I guess you can call him, Chuck Buda, will be on. And basically he has a ton of questions for me as a newer author. So we're going to kind of play back and forth with that. And then I also will have a segment called Marketing Morsels, which is Erin Al-Mahiri. And she does PR she did PR for Sam Hain, Sinister Grins Press. She's done a lot of really big horror authors that she's done the PR stuff for, and she's working with me right now too to get the Dirty Deeds 2 out there. So we're going to do a segment every week, and it'll be a weekly show, and we'll get themes and we'll get questions from other people. So I'm really excited about that. We recorded a couple of episodes already, so that'll debut in about 3 weeks.
You're like me. If you get unbusy, you get bored, and then I get in trouble. I don't know about you, but I get in trouble when I get bored.
Yeah. I'm trying to stay busy and good.
And for us as authors, sometimes, Armand, that's a little bit difficult to do, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, very, very, very much so. I think it's in our DNA. It's in our makeup.
Well, especially when the voices in our head are dancing around and telling us what to do, and we want to argue with them, and you can't shut them up. No, like you said, you cannot shut those voices up. Just like Green River Blend. Once you sat down there with that cup of coffee and looked at that blank sheet of paper and those 4 characters jumped out at you, would they shut up until you started writing?
No, they didn't shut up all the way through the book. In fact, they didn't shut up enough that I kept I about halfway through the book usually I say, okay, here's the idea for the next one, you know.
Let me ask you this. When you're trying to write and you know how you want this story to go, do you have arguments with the voices in your head because they want it to go a different way?
I've gotten to the point now where after writing for, 20, 25 years, I don't even argue anymore. I just say, all right, just take me on the journey. Let me see where this is going. And non-authors don't understand that. They think it's a joke, or it's us being, I guess trying to make it more than it is. But it's the characters that tell you where this story is going or what they want to do. Once you really know that character and you get into their head, they're going to stop you and go, there's no way I'm going down to that basement. There's no way I'm going to do anything but shoot this guy in the head. I mean, and when you're like, but I don't want you to do that because I need you to be here. And then basically the character says, no, that doesn't, figure out another way to get me there, but this isn't going to happen. And I've learned to just kind of roll with it and see what happens. And usually I don't paint myself into a corner, which is nice.
Well, with this true crime that I just finished, it took me about 3 months to allow my victim to come to me and tell me, I want you to write this book this way, because I'm trying to figure out how am I going to put in the book the message that I know needs to go out there. And one day it just hit me, and she said, you're writing it this way, and if I ever tried to veer off, no, watch this, I'm shutting you down. Now you have to get up.
Yeah.
I'm going, okay. Do you lose sleep over your characters?
Sometimes I will. My problem is once I'm up, it's hard for me to go back to sleep if my brain turns on. So I'll it might be 4 o'clock in the morning. I got to get up to go to the bathroom, and a part of me is screaming, just stay off. Just go to the bathroom and go back to bed. And then sometimes I'll just get up, and then halfway back to bed I'll go, oh, wait a minute, I know what I can do, and then I'm up. And then I'll try to go back to sleep, and I lay there for an hour or so, and eventually I just get up, and I'll just, I have to write, or at least have to take notes, or do something creative before I can go back to sleep. Because
if you don't, it'll drive you crazy.
Well, you'd lay there till 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then you have to get up anyway, so it doesn't really help.
You might as well just get up and be done with it. And do you find that when you're deep into writing and you're so deep in that well, and somebody interrupts you, you want to just wring their neck?
Yeah, I'm very good at, if I sat at Kokomo's Cafe for over 2 years, and I wrote a lot of stories and a lot of books then. So I can take the noise. I have to have some kind of noise. Like in my office where I write, I have a fan that is very loud, but I like it because it's noise. And I'm fine with that. But if you start talking directly at me, it just takes me completely out. And that's the only thing that drives me nuts. I can have music on in my headphones. Doesn't bother me. People coming and going out the door, whatever. But as soon as somebody asks me a direct question, then that pulls me out of what I'm doing. And sometimes it takes you a while to get back into, the zone.
And that is so frustrating because whatever thought process you had at that moment, it's gone.
Yeah.
And you can't get it back.
No, it takes a long time, and a lot of times I'll be right in the middle of a chapter, and I'll be running on it, and then somebody asks me a question, and then I'm like, I'm done. So I move on to I'll just write a different story. I'll just go right to something else now. I know not even to try to get that magic back. I'll just because I write 3, 4, 5 projects at the same time, so I'm all over the place anyway.
Well, you have to be slightly ADHD, and you have to have an A-type personality.
Yeah.
Because people that don't know us as artists don't understand that, number one, our brain never shuts off. Number two, we always see a story in anything or any place, and once that story pops, we have to stop and write that note, put it somewhere before it goes away. And I've been known to be kind of rude with people when I'm trying to write something down and they want to talk, and I'm going, just a minute, and I'm writing, and they're going, blah, blah, and I'm going, leave me alone. Just leave me alone a minute.
Yeah. It was, thankfully, when I first started dating, my wife now, when we first started dating, I was already a full-time author for about a year or two, or maybe more. And so I was already committed to this. So she learned right away that I'm not being rude, and I'm daydreaming, but I'm daydreaming about a story or a book or something. So there was times when the conversation would trail off. If she knew I was right in the middle of something, or especially if I had a deadline, so she normally doesn't bother me when I'm doing stuff. She understands that hey, I have to write, and she's not going to come and bother me in my office. She's doing her own thing, which is nice. She doesn't have to be sitting next to me every 2 seconds, which is nice. She's got her own life, and so it works out that when I'm in the zone, she's not going to bother me on anything, and it's not trivial. People in the past that I've been with, what do you want for dinner? I'm like, really? I'm working.
But see, people don't. When we say we're working, they look at us like we have two heads. They don't think we're really working.
I once had a girlfriend that I would make pretend I was writing. I would actually move my fingers or tap the keys, because if she saw me stop writing, and I was writing on the dining room table, so she would actually start talking to me if I stopped writing, if my fingers stopped moving, because she thought, you're done. And I kept trying to explain to her, I'm not done. I'm just thinking of what the next line is, and you keep interrupting me on that. And she just could not understand that. She could not get that.
Like you, I have a very supportive husband. He is such an encouragement and such a support that I don't know how I ever survived without him, because
that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah, he is diabetic, and he doesn't eat when he first gets up in the morning. He likes to have his coffee and read his news on the computer. And I'll get up and I'll take him, coffee and take care of that. And then it'll get quiet. After that third cup, it'll get quiet. And then it'll dawn on me, he probably needs to eat before he passes out. So I'll say, are you ready to eat? He said, I didn't want to bother you. And he does not know how that makes me feel, to be that much appreciated.
Yeah.
That my writing is worth something to him.
Yeah, and that's the good part. This is like, we do a lot of conventions, which I never like to do, but she'll book the rooms, she'll book the table, she'll do all that stuff. She usually drives. I mean, she's basically just leading me by the hand, and I'm there. And she helps with the money, she helps with the table, she talks. She's read most of my books, so she's talking with the fans. She's been on my podcast a couple of times, so it's a lot of fun there, and it allows me to just relax, because I'm not really a social person out in public. So it allows me to just turn it on and talk to people and do all that stuff. And it makes it so much easier because she's there, and she understands me. She understands when I need a break, when I need to just go up to my room because I'm having like a panic attack or something. There's too many people around me or whatever. And so it's definitely helped. And one time she said, she said to my kid, my daughter, she said, how did your dad live without me, joking around, before we met? And my daughter said, not too well. And I thought, what, that's pretty true, because I hated going to conventions. I hated leaving the house. I hated doing any of this stuff. I was so, we're creative, so I was writing whatever I wanted to write. I remember about 2 years ago, Shelley said to me, how do you know, what do you write every day? I said, 2,000 words. She goes, and how do you know that? I'm like, I don't know. That's what I think I'm writing. So she actually made me a spreadsheet to keep track of it, which has helped me so much. I would look and go, oh man, I was supposed to write this book, and now it's going to be late because I totally forgot about it, because I had written it down on a Post-it note and totally forgot. So she's really helped me with the contracts, and she's helped me with putting a schedule together and what I need to write and the time that I can write my own stuff. And it's just amazing how organized I am because of her now. 2 different dry erase boards up on my wall. That kind of keeps me in check every day, which is nice.
She's become your personal assistant.
Yes, it's been pretty awesome with and she has a career, so she works many hours. She's a commercial property manager, so she's here in Jacksonville, but then she also goes up to Atlanta, and she does a lot of traveling on her own too. So it's nice because then most of the time I get to go with her, and I'll sit in the hotel room and write while she's touring the properties and doing her stuff. So it works out.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Off the Chain. My name is Yvonne Mason. I am your host, and this particular radio show will discuss just about anything as long as it's not illegal, immoral, or pornographic. My guest tonight is Armand Rosamilia, and he has written several books. One of them is Green River Blend, which I am reading now. May give me a whole new insight on how much coffee I consume and where I consume it. He also has his own podcast show. He also has his own blog. And if you've just tuned in, you need to make friends with Armand because he is an amazing author. He is just an amazing all-around creative person. We want to get into, and on top of that, he's got a pretty cute wife that keeps him in line and keeps him on the straight and narrow. And if you are a creative person and you've never had that kind of support, you don't know what it's like to have someone in your life that, A, appreciates your creativity, B, is willing to help you be successful in spite of the fact that they have their own career, they have their own life. Your creativity is tantamount to their happiness.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds strange, but it's true. From my interview with Armand tonight, his wife is very happy in helping him because she wants him to be successful. That is one of the best relationships that I know.
Yeah, she does a lot of my swag. She does a lot of the creating the bookmarks and all the little stuff like that sucks up my time so I can't write. She understands that. She's putting together, she's revamping my newsletter, which is great, which is something that I really didn't have a ton of time to do. And she's been, from going to the conventions and talking to the writers and talking to their teams and everything, she's willing to throw out different ideas and spend the money. My thing was I never wanted to spend money on swag, and she was like, you have to. We have to get bookmarks and bottle openers and postcards
right.
and wristbands and everything else. And we just did a couple of romance conventions this year for the first time, kind of thinking outside the box. And the amount of swag there was crazy, but we sold a ton of books because we were out there and we handed out a lot of bookmarks and a lot of other things. And I really believe that helped me for the future sell some books. So
absolutely, because it's like when you run for a political office. My husband's been involved in politics for 60 years. And in Politics 101, the thing that people remember most is not the political signs or the political ads. They remember the things like the T-shirts or the nail files or the bookmarks or the bottle opener, because every time they use that nail file, they see your name.
Right.
And they don't forget it. So that's going to jumpstart them to say, oh, let me go see if he's got some new books out. So they go to the computer, they pull up Amazon or your website or Facebook. Wow, he's got one coming out in October. Oh, yeah, I'm putting a pre-order in for that.
Yeah, and it's for authors, I say all the time, and that's one of the things with doing the Mondo Method podcast coming up. It's think long term as an author. If you go to a convention and you only sell 3 books, but you've given out 40 bookmarks, that's 40 potential sales down the line somewhere.
Exactly.
And that's really how you have to look at everything. Every conversation, you have no idea where that's going to lead to long term. I mean, how long have you and I known each other?
Oh,
feels
God,
like
forever.
Forever. So it's one of those things where when you said you were going to do this, and I said, I would, I want to jump in. I want to do this. I want to do this interview with you because I know you and I know your work and everything else. And that's one of those cool things that when we first met 6 years, whatever, however long it's been now, it was not, hey, let me be friends with her now because 10 years from now I'm going to be on her podcast, But that's where it leads you to.
And most of us are indie authors. I have indie author friends all over the world, and I have musicians, and I have artists. And what I have found, in fact, today, there was a comment on a status that this girl put up that an indie author had finished her book, but she was not going to publish it because of some of the backlash she got. Mm. Now, to me, that is a no-no 101. That is lack of self-confidence 101.
Yeah.
We don't write to please the masses. We write because if we don't write, we'll go insane.
Yeah.
And we write because we have to. And there's always going to be somebody out there that doesn't like your work, correct?
Oh, yeah. I don't care who you are.
And then what you have to do is you have to just let that roll off your back, and you have to just keep putting yourself out there and putting yourself out there. And don't worry about rejection. I'm sure you've had some bad reviews just like I have, but you know what? What I tell people is my true crimes are not for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, and I look in. I don't read reviews anymore because it still drives me nuts. But I always tell people look at any author. Look at Stephen King. Look at classic books. They all have 1-star reviews. I mean, you cannot please everybody, and there's no sense in trying to. Just please the people that like you, that respond positively and want to. Okay, I've read this book. Now, what else do you have? And I want to go and I want to read 100 different books from you. I want to read everything you've ever released because I like you. Those are the people you think about positively, and you just find your voice as an author, and you just keep writing, and you just keep doing, and never going, well, if I do this, they're not going to like it, and I'm going to get a 1-star review because you can't do that. You can't look at that at all. You can't look and go, how do I get a 5-star review? I mean, writing it to that 5-star review because, well, the people like this last time. No, you just write your story. And if it's a good story, you're going to find that audience. And again, it's long-term. When I first started selling books and I was selling 5 a week, and I was like, oh, my God, I'm up to – I might sell 25 books this month. And now I'm able to – 6 years later, I'm doing this full-time, and I'm living really quite comfortable with all the stuff that I'm doing. I'm able to – this is truly living the dream.
The thing about it, let's think of all of the great literary writers. Edgar Allan Poe, one of my favorite authors, died penniless.
Yeah.
And when he would submit things he was even disowned by his father because he said, what you're doing is foolish. When he would submit things to the newspaper and the magazines, they would laugh at him. Now there's movies made about his books. The House of Usher. That was the first horror movie I ever went to see. Terrified the daylights out of me. The Raven.
Well, I don't want to die. I don't want to die penniless, and I don't want my father to disown me. But there's a ton of those great authors out there that just were not appreciated in their time that we appreciate now. And there are a lot of authors today that we're all self-published, so not everybody knows our name. Not everybody knows we're out there. It's funny because I could probably name about a dozen authors off the top of my head that are making 6 figures, easily, that are signing $250,000 contracts with small presses and or an audio deal or something else that are not household names, that people aren't really aware of them, and they like it that way and care of their family, and they like being able to live under that radar and able to go out to the grocery store whenever they want.
And they also like having control of their work.
Yeah.
Because if you're like me, I don't want somebody else controlling what I've written. I want to be able to pick my cover, to control the content of my book, because that content is my content. It's not some editor who's maybe a frustrated writer who's going to go in and rewrite the whole thing because that's their interpretation of my work.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot.
You know, as an author, we're all different. We all have different, unique paths that we take and careers, and you have to look at that. You say, how much control do I want of my work, and is there a dollar figure that I will give my work away for? And that's up to the individual. Of, do you want to be a self-published author and maybe not sell any books? Do you want to be a self-published author and build that long term and sell a ton of books and make that 70% that's in your pocket and you control all that stuff? But each person is different, and that's the fun of this, that there's no real right or wrong path to this. It's just your path.
And you have to be comfortable in your path.
Yeah.
And I think that this young lady that they were talking about on this status thread, I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I don't think that she was really, I don't want to say non-committed, but I don't think she was comfortable with putting herself out there and maybe facing rejection. As artists, we all face rejection.
Yeah.
Every one of us. My first book started writing in the 70s and finally published myself in 2007, had been rejected so many times I could probably wallpaper my house with the rejection letters.
Yeah, I used to have a filing cabinet that was full.
And I would just look at them and go, it's your loss, people.
Yeah.
This is a good book. It brings a message. So I don't think I failed when I got the rejection letters. I feel like I succeeded because they acknowledged me.
Right.
And this is what she's got to come to terms with is if someone rejects you, they're not rejecting you, they're acknowledging you.
Yeah, and you're going to I always say, if there was a mistake to be made doing this, especially self-publishing, I've made it. I've probably made it 10 times. But, you learn from a lot of it, and I've learned from a lot of the authors around me, the old guard who came before me and the people who came up in my generation of writers, and then some of the guys that are half my age that are coming out and doing this, and the ones that are asking a ton of questions, the ones that are not afraid to get their head ripped off by a reviewer or by a publisher. I think that's important. You have to, you got to build up that thick skin, and
you got to take
sad,
that first step.
Yeah, it's sad that somebody is, and publicly is posting and saying, now I don't know if I'm going to put this out now because I don't want all the negative and everything else. I mean, that's a shame. You throw it out there and move on. Write the next book. I mean, just it's out there and it's time to do it.
As my brother says, just do it, Yvonne. Just do it. And this is the brother that's mentally and physically challenged. So when he says just do it, you better believe I'm going to just do it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want him ripping my head off.
Yeah, it's funny that everybody says, what's the secret? And I said the secret is writing the next book. Just keep writing.
Yeah.
The rest of it will come. Make the mistakes, learn from the things that are working, and build on that. Get a great rapport with other authors, with readers, and be accessible. I'm very accessible on Facebook and Twitter and on my blog, and everywhere else. I go to the conventions and I'll sit and have a beer with you and talk with you. I mean, that's part of how you do this as an author. That's the 99% of the time we're sitting in a dark room typing away, and that other 1% when you're out there, then that's time to be social and meet people and be genuine and be yourself, and that sells more books than any post I'll ever put up that says buy my book.
Oh, absolutely.
You're selling you. I don't know how many times I've been talking to people on Twitter for weeks and weeks, and they go, holy crap, I just realized that you're also an author. What do you suggest? Because I'd never mentioned my books at all to that person, because I'm just having a conversation about something.
And this is one of the things that I teach when I do marketing, and if I could speak English, it would help, is that before we can even sell that first book, we have to get out there and brand ourselves and market ourselves. We have to put ourselves out there completely naked, in a metaphorical way of saying, and say, here I am, this is what I bring to the table.
Exactly.
And that's what you do.
That's how you sell books.
Yes, is you brand yourself. This is why we do podcasts. This is why we do conventions. This is why we do events. This is why we put ourselves out on Facebook and Twitter and you name it, and we put ourselves out there. In fact, my mother says, Yvonne, how can you stand being out there like that all over the Internet? I said, Mother, if I want to sell books, I have to sell myself. People have to know who I am before I can even sell the first book.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to do that.
Exactly.
Maybe she's not willing to do that, but we have to help her along that it's okay to put yourself out there.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's give our listening audience some tips, because you and I have been at this game for a while now and made some mistakes down through the years, and we've, like you said, hopefully learned from those mistakes. One of the genres that I write about is historical fiction. And if I'm writing historical fiction like the Mad Hatter set in London in 1888, I'm not going to sell a hat for $12, am I?
No.
How am I going to sell that hat?
Well, you sell anything by not necessarily talking about how great the hat is. I was always, and I was in retail management for 25 years, and I sold footwear. I sold shoes for probably about 15 or 20 of those on commission. So my selling technique was always not what's great about this shoe, but why you need this shoe. What's missing in your life? This pair of friggin' shoes is what's missing in your life. And to me, that was always the easiest way to do it, you know. And it's the same with just having a conversation with people, and they're talking. You know, you kind of walk away. It's kind of like going into the dollar store, and the joke is always, let's go in here and see all the things we didn't realize we needed to spend our money on. And when somebody comes up when somebody comes up to that table, I want them to at some point go, you know what? I do need a haunted house story set in Georgia. I had no idea I needed this up until 2 minutes ago, but that's what I need. And it's easier to do it when the customer, when the reader thinks it's their idea. The reader thinks, hey, this might be a good book. This is something that catches my eye that I'm going to read with that little twist. You know, the way I promote Green River Blend at conventions is I say, this is a horror book about coffee. And then 9 times out of 10 they go, what does that mean? And I say, it means you got to read it. And they'll pick it up and they'll read the back of the book and they'll go, all right. And a lot of times they'll buy it because, hey, that's intriguing enough without me having to go through the entire spiel of what this book is about and the different characters and all this other stuff. It's just a nice, easy, haunted house story set in Georgia. And they're like, oh, let me see what this is about. And that's, to me, that's the cool part of doing this, because the rest of the time they're standing at that table with me, I'm just talking to them. I'm just talking to them as a fellow author or as a fellow reader, or we're just talking about wherever we are, and it's just conversations like that. And that's always fun for me. Just have a conversation with people, and then they go to the table and say, what was that book you had mentioned? Oh, it's this one. Okay, let me grab this, and this, and then they're out of there. I mean, it's great.
But if I'm reading a historical fiction, and I know that the story is set in England, the monetary exchange is not the same as it would be in the States. So if I'm reading a historical fiction, I don't expect to see dollars and cents. And if somebody puts that in there, that ruins the whole book. Am I correct?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of with something like that, and that's something that I don't know if I would ever be able to tackle, because there's so much research that goes into making that a good book, and that's a lot of work, because the smallest little thing will take you out of that story.
Yes.
The stupidest, like you said, that somebody walking in and saying, "I'll give you $12 for that hat," in the 1800s. Well, hold on, there's many things wrong with what you just said, and as a reader, at that point, you stop reading the book.
Because it's done. It's no longer believable.
Yeah. There's a suspension of belief when you're writing about zombies or supernatural monsters or things like that. But for the most part, if they're set in a real-world setting, that real-world setting has to be comfortable for the reader, that they understand. When you say he went to the mall, they understand in their head what a mall looks like.
Right.
They went and bought a newspaper. The reader understands what a newspaper looks like, feels like, and all that. But then if you're doing something completely off the wall or different with that takes them right out where they're going, wait a minute. I stay away from a lot of military stuff, even though I've been, because of doing the Hollywood stuff, I've talked to a ton of ex-military, Navy SEALs, and they've showed me a lot of videos, and I've had many conversations with them that I've used in my books when I'm writing zombie stuff for them, but I'm not comfortable enough to just sit down and go, oh, let me just write this, because I know somebody's going to go, that gun doesn't have a magazine, or that gun is 6 shots. That guy just fired 12 shots, and that takes you out of the story if you have any background in that, or if you make an obvious mistake like, here's a $12 hat, and you're in 1800s London. I mean, that's part of a problem that unfortunately you see a lot.
Well, let me tell you what I had to do for that particular book. I ordered a map of Southwark and Whitechapel and that area in 1888. And you know what happened in 1888. Mm-hmm. That was the year of the Ripper. So I ordered that map. Then I ordered books on Victorian houses, furniture, dresses, men's clothing, currency. Because the currency, even in London in 1888, is different than it is in London today.
Oh, yeah. See, and most people probably wouldn't think of that, but for the people who do know that, you've lost them as a reader. If you're looking at it as today's monetary, the same system that we use today.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what we're telling future authors out there and authors out there that are thinking about doing historical fiction, it's a great genre, but if you want to do it right, it can take anywhere from a year to 4 years just for the research. The Mad Hatter took 3 years. A Voice from the Grave took 4 years, because what I did with A Voice from the Grave, which is set in Andersonville, which was the last prison camp that the Confederates had during the war, and it was at the end of the rail line, is I bought every book I could find on the Civil War, on the guns, on the camp, on the dress, all the way down to the bullets, to the musket ball.
Because you need to know everything there is all the way down to that. You can't make a mistake. It has to be as real as possible. I just finished reading a Blake Crouch book, Abandoned, which is set in Arizona in a mining town in the 1800s. Half of the book is looking back, and then it's a modern back and forth, and it's a thriller. And the research that obviously went into that book, and then at the end of the book, he basically gives a bibliography of all the different books and articles and explorations he had to do for, like what you're saying, the money system and, mining and the clothing and the horses and, just all the way down to all of it, the lingo, and it just made for a great book. And I love reading those types of books because you could tell the author went through so much to get that story right, and I love that.
Did you feel like you were actually in that time period?
Yeah, and I love all of his work, and that was it really got you that you felt like you were there, and you were privy to the lingo and different things that you're normally obviously not in your normal day-to-day life, and that was fun. You learned something, you learned what was going on, and I thought that was really cool. And it wasn't the Old West from the John Wayne Old West. It was the actual how these people lived back then.
Right, which was rough. It wasn't romantic at all.
No.
And speaking of popping books and being correct, do you feel the same way that I do, that if a book cover doesn't jump out at you, you're not going to pick up that book?
You always hear all the time, everybody, don't judge a book by its cover, but we do. We all do, and we will. That's just human nature, and I 100% agree with that. If I need to look at a book and know what genre it is, just by looking at it. And a lot of people are like, no, when I was going through Kindle Scout, that was a perfect example. There were people that were trying to get this unique, different book cover and everything else. And then when I got in, and Amazon said, no, we want the reader to look at the cover and buy the book based on that cover, because they know, okay, I read historical romance, and there's a half-naked, swashbuckler on the cover with a woman with a blouse. That's what they're looking for. They don't want some weird, obtuse, thing on the object on it. Who knows what that is? You're into zombie books. You want to have a zombie. You want to have some blood on the cover. You want to have something that immediately the reader goes, okay, I know exactly what this is, and I'm going to, there's a plus, there's a positive right from the beginning because I like the cover. Now let me read what the book is about and hopefully buy the book.
And you immediately
when I did the original, when I did the original Dying Days covers, it was kind of no rhyme or reason. I just did a cover, and then a year later I did another one, and there was no, when you put the books, the print books, the first 5 books on the table, you couldn't really even tell they were the same series. And I always sold them, but it wasn't a, phenomenal sales. And then when I redid the covers with the idea of I wanted to create one picture, and there's blood, there's a lot of, the blood in the water and the overhead shot, I started selling them like crazy. We were at Scares the Care, and a guy walked up and said, those are zombie books? And I said, yeah. And he goes, all right, I'll take, and he bought all 6 of them without even reading them. They're zombie books. He took all 6 of them. So
wow.
It definitely, the cover does sell that book. I've been very happy with working with Devil Dog Press, because Green River Blend, my thing was, you don't want a big, busy cover. I just want to, it's a cup of coffee with and the foam of it is a skull in the middle of the coffee. That was my concept, and they ran with it, and they.
Book. That is exactly why I bought the book, because I'm going, what the hell does a cup of coffee with a skull in it have to do with the story?
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I want people. That's what I want my. Actually, my wife just reminded me that it was her concept for the coffee cup with the skull, which
smart woman.
Great. She also did the original, the Dirty Deeds one. She actually took the original picture for that one, which was another cool thing I went through Kindle Scout, because they said if there's a weapon, if there's bullets, if there's blood, then the Amazon algorithms is going to knock that cover down. So I changed the concept slightly for the actual cover, and I think it worked a lot better.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Off the Chain. My name is Yvonne Mason. I am your host, and my guest tonight is radio host and author Armand Rosamilia, and he said that I do pronounce his last name correctly, which, like
yes,
my first name, most people get wrong. And we were having a wonderful conversation with each other about books, podcasts, and now we're discussing things that authors need to know as they start out on their journey. And the gist of the conversation in the beginning was that we have a new author out there, and I hope I can get her name and get in contact with her, that is afraid to publish her work because she's afraid of rejection. And both Armand and I say, just take that leap of faith and go for it. Don't worry about what people say. Don't worry about what people do, because we all as artists are rejected at some point in time, but that doesn't stop us. We succeed. No. We do not stop. Is that correct?
And I would tell her, put the book out there, and then do some promotion on it, but get that next one ready to go, and just keep writing, and then don't worry about what people are saying, because there's going to be people. There's going to be people who don't like the book. There's going to be people who don't like the concept. There's going to be people who are jealous. Other people who can't write, or other authors that aren't making the money or that they think you're making. The perception of, my book is better than that guy. Why is he making more money than me? You get that a lot. And you just basically go for it. You just turn all of that off, and you just got to be happy. You got to be happy with what you're doing in life, and that's the way I always look at it. I always say, no matter what I'm doing, I'm happier now than I was working 70 or 80 hours a week doing retail, and I never want to go back to that.
You were in my head again. We're also talking about some of the common mistakes that are made in novels when people are writing, and one of them I want to talk about is what is called, how can I put it, rape is not attractive. And in one of Armand's blogs, which he reblogged, I just want to read something real quick because it struck me. I am a victim of rape, and I write about victims of rape, and I tell you, it is not there's nothing romantic about it. And this is what this writer says. He says, I've read a couple of books recently that both had the same theme, Stockholm Syndrome. Neither was badly written, in a slightly trashy summer novel sort of fashion. What worried me about both books was that they were basically about raping women, which tends to get glamorized because their captors are naturally incredibly handsome, sexually attractive, and rich. In both books, women were drugged by men who had previously seen them and decided they wanted to possess them body and soul, primarily bodily. But they seem to enjoy fucking with their minds as well. Now, if someone drugs you in order to be alone with you and then have so-called consensual sex when the woman has no choice, I think that sounds an awful lot like rape, regardless of whether the men are handsome, sexy, and rich. The reality of rape cases is that women do not get held captive in luxurious surroundings. One rapist held his victim on a tropical island, and she fell in love with her captor. And the problem with books like these is they perpetrate the myth that these women fantasize about being drugged and raped. They don't. They might fantasize about having consensual sex with rich, handsome, sexy men, but that isn't rape. There is a difference. Rape is not to be confused with sex, love, or romance. Rape is about power, abuse, and violence, which brings me to that book that was out, 50 Shades of Grey.
Mm-hmm.
I have a problem with that book. I will not read that book because that book is exactly what this author is talking about.
And that part you read right there, that was what made me reblog that, because it's common sense, you would think, but yet you read it. You read that a lot. I've had parts in my books where there have been situations like that. In Dying Days, in the first one, there's a really horrific thing where she's that somebody's trying to rape her, and it's not anything that you would glamorize or oh, well, they're going to fall in love now. I mean, it's that to me, that's always ridiculous, and it is a horrible thing for a woman, obviously, to have to go through, and a horrible thing for a man to do. And those books, just that one thing you just read right there, that really hits you of how people, even though you're writing fiction, that's just to me, that's over the top. That's just not cool to do it that way. And I've never read 50 Shades, and I never will. And just from what I understand about it, it's pretty much it's that concept. And
throughout all three of her books, it's the same concept. And yes, she made a boatload of money off of it, and yes, they made a major motion picture out of it. But what it does is it desensitizes that act of aggression and the criminality of it. My degree is in criminal justice, and I've seen women that have been raped. And you cannot put that genie back in the bottle, because what that raper does is he takes that woman's dignity and self-respect. And when we glamorize,
and that's what it is, though. It's not the sex. It's never about the act for sexual gratification. It's the power behind it. It's the,
right.
It's the degradation. It's all that part of it. And some authors, I don't think, understand that or get it. I think that's a real problem.
Well, the sad part is they glamorize it. It's glamorized in the movies. And it bothers me, because then when a victim gets in front of a judge, that victim then becomes a criminal, and the criminal then becomes a victim. And that's sad.
Yeah, I agree.
Like you will never see in one of my books the glamorization of that act. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're thinking of writing about a rape scene, don't make it pretty. Don't make her fall in love with her captor, because it does not happen. Something else that and even when you get books from the Big Six, this happens. Punctuation. Quotation marks. This writer says either use curly quotation marks or straight ones, but not both. How many times have you seen that?
Yeah, a lot.
Well, they use both, and you wonder, is this a quote within a quote?
Yeah, I am really bad. I have no, I didn't go to college for an English degree. I didn't do any of that, and so I get beat up pretty bad with beta readers and with editors. I work with one editor. I've worked with her for a couple of years, and she beats me up because she actually has an English degree, and she'll beat me up over quotations, and she beats me up over commas, and when to use a semicolon, and when, and I just say just mark it. Don't give me the rules, because I'm just going to break it every time. I don't know what's all those things. I don't care about that. I say, and Brian Keene said it one time on one of his podcasts. We're pulp fiction writers. We're not writing the great American novel. I don't want to write, The Great Gatsby or Gone with the Wind here. I'm just writing a fun book that somebody's going to pick up, and hopefully they're going to read over 3 or 4 nights. and they're going to enjoy it and move on to the next book. And that's, those are the books that I always read growing up. I mean, I never read, Robert E. Howard's Conan and said, oh, well, he's missing a comma here. I mean, typos and stuff can take you out of it, but I never looked and go, oh, this should be a semicolon here, or his sentence structure is wrong. I never worried about that stuff, and as a writer, I don't worry about that stuff. The editors beat me up over that. They'll move my words around and different things. They know what the idea is. They just help me to change that a little bit.
And again, we're back to that. If you're going to be a writer, ladies and gentlemen, if this is your dream, you have to have a good editor because, like Armand says, we get so deep in the weeds, we think we've written something that one of our characters has said, and we might read it 3 or 4 times, and it says we see it as we thought we wrote it until the editor gets it. And then my editor goes, Yvonne, what were you thinking? Well, I know I wrote it that way, and she called me the other day. She said, did you really mean to say this? And I said, yeah, but not quite that way. And I said, just fix it. But you have to have an editor you trust, because we talked earlier about editors being sometimes frustrated writers that will take your work and make it theirs. So you have to have that editor that understands you and understands where you're coming from and that you can trust with that baby of yours. Yeah,
the best editors I've ever worked with are not writers. They're readers. Because they don't want to change. They don't want to change your story. They don't want to rework it. Because as an author, as I'm reading a book, a lot of times I'll go, oh, I hope he goes here. I hope her idea is this, because that's how I would write the rest of this book. Or watching a movie, and I say, please don't make it this because it's so obvious. And then they go there, and you're like, oh, why am I wasting my time watching this? Because we're writers. We're always writers. We're no longer. I can no longer just pick up a book and read it for just the enjoyment of it. I get enjoyment out of it, but I'm also reading it going, I would have done this or I would have done that. My mind's still working. And for another author that's editing your stuff, it's the same thing. So I'm very happy with her because she's not an author. She doesn't want to be an author. She just loves to read books, and she enjoys finding all those little mistakes, and she'll question things because as a writer, I'm writing a scene out, and I know what the scene is. I know all the backstory. I know everything else. But the reader doesn't understand that. Exactly. So when an editor hits that and goes, what is this conversation you're having with these people? It doesn't make any sense under this. And you're like, well, no, because this. And she's like, but I don't read that. How am I supposed to know that? And like you said, you could read those lines 100 times, and you're seeing with the words, that missing word in there. You're trained that you're seeing, but the editor's going, you're missing a word, even though you've self-edited it 50 times.
And you're saying, but I put it there. I know I didn't. No, you didn't.
No,
because your mind.
But you can look at it and it's there.
It's there, yeah.
Yeah, you swear it's there. Yeah.
My editor is a school teacher, and she teaches special needs children. So I fit right in because I'm dyslexic, and I have trouble transposing letters as well as transposing words. And she'll catch them, and that's why she'll say, Yvonne, did you really, really mean this sentence to be the way it is? And I'll say, no, but you know what I meant, so fix it. In fact, she called me the other day and she said, this is a really long sentence. It's like 3 sentences in one long sentence. Did you take a breath? And I said, no, I just wrote it. Fix it. She said, okay. Another thing that we sometimes, as novice authors, have a problem with is consistency. For instance, and again, I'm quoting your reblog, where you have blonde, BOLDNDE, and then down the page you put BLOND.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find yourself doing that sometimes?
I had what's funny is I had a book that went all the way through editors, through beta readers, through 5 beta readers, 2 different editors, because it had been through 2 different publishers, and all the way to a narrator who narrated the book, and as he was giving me chapters back, my wife was listening to it, because I don't like listening to audiobooks of my stuff. It drives me nuts. I just don't like it because I want to correct everything. And she found where I had changed the character's name in one instance. The original name of that character, about 15 chapters in, had not been corrected, and nobody had caught it. And there literally had been a dozen eyes on that book and hundreds of readers who had read the book, and nobody had caught that the name, and it was subtle. It was a couple of letters off, but and that drove me, absolutely nuts. That we have to correct this immediately and everything else, and it happens. I try not to. Again, my beta readers usually catch a lot of that stuff. In one of the Dying Days, one of the characters, which was originally a he, and then I went back and changed it to a she. But a couple of times in there, as I went back, I missed. So there was a couple of he's in there that they caught right away. That, in my mind, reading it over, it was she, because I looked at that 50 times, and it did not catch it at all. So yeah, I mean, we're all gonna do that. We're all gonna no matter how many times as an author you go through stuff, you're gonna miss common stuff like that, especially if you're writing a book over the course of a long period of time. For you, if you're writing a historical book over the course of 3 years, you're doing this. Some things are going to slip by. I'm doing 5 different books at a time some weeks that I'm trying to meet deadlines, and I'm just doing certain scenes, and sometimes you miss something like that.
Well, I changed in one of the in the last historical novel I did, the Mad Hatter. I changed the name of the main character, and thought I went back through and got it all changed. And then when I went back, and after I was going through my read-through at the end, when I finished the first draft and I was going through and reading, I had missed about 5 different places. And I'm going, what did I do? And
yeah.
Again, the more you mess with it, the more you screw it up. Yeah. Tenses. Do you have trouble with tenses like I do?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not an English major, so there are times when I will do that. I did work a book with other authors. There's 4 of us, and one of them would drive us nuts because he would write everything in present tense. And that was just and we would be like, no, we used, now go back and rewrite your chapter, and it would drive you nuts. And probably about every 3rd or 4th chapter that he wrote in the book would be present tense. And then I did a horror humor series, kind of a trashy about hair metal in the 80s thing with Frank Edler called Shocker, and it's in first person. But then he kept writing it in 3rd person when we first started doing the first book, and I had to keep yelling at him, go back, and he did that about 3 or 4 times before he got into the groove of, hey, we're doing this in first person.
Do you catch yourself? There's a book that I wrote called Brilliant Insanity, and I wrote that book in first and 3rd person. Have you done that in some of your works?
No, I usually stick to one or the other. I'm not smart enough to go back and forth.
It gets challenging. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, that book. It was a fun book to write, but it was one of the most challenging books that I've ever written, because one minute my killer is talking, and he's the one that's talking in first person, and the next minute my secondary character is talking, and she's the one that's talking in 3rd person, or the story is in 3rd person. And with my dyslexia, and after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my brain goes on meltdowns. So there were some very interesting conversations between those 2 characters that I had to go back and fix. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about publishing. You rewrote or you reblogged a blog called Publishing, Seeing Things as They Are. And it goes something like this. A few friends of mine are pinning their hopes on literary agents and traditional publishing contracts. Independent publishing is not for everyone, so I don't try hard to dissuade them. Traditional publishing is not for me, but people have their reasons. No need to rehash the why. Let's delve deeper into building a better how. And one of the things I circled is if you go hunting for a contract with an agent or a publisher, know the games and the real odds. Now, you and I both have been in this game for a long time. I got burnt by a publisher when I first started. Never again. And I know you probably have seen your share of shady deals. So tell our audience some of the things or some of the traps that young novice authors might fall into.
I think well, first off, the blog there that I reblog, and I reblog most of the stuff, is Robert Chaz Chute, who's definitely read his stuff whenever he posts because he's brilliant, and he's worked for, in Canada, he's worked for the big publishers. He's worked for Harlequin or something like that, So he's worked for these big companies that used to churn out books, years ago. So he knows what he's talking about. And, unfortunately, when you're a new writer and somebody says, hey, I want to publish your book, that's the greatest feeling in the world. And I had that very early. I was in 2009. I had a book called Death Metal was published by a publisher, and I signed a contract. But luckily, the contract was for only a year. But unfortunately, if he had put out it was a 50-year contract, I would have signed it because I was so excited. There's no advance. There was very shady with the royalties are going to be, and I had no control over the cover. So the cover of that book came out, which I absolutely hated. And after a year of selling, I think we sold like 19 copies for the year. I took the book back and re-released it eventually on my own. And I got lucky on that one. Now there's other publishers that just went out of business and stopped paying royalties. There's a company right now that I had very high hopes for that hasn't paid royalties in about a year and a half now, and they're still they still have those books out there for sale, and they ignore emails and unfortunately it happens, and you learn from them. You don't sign huge long-term contracts, and I think the biggest thing is a lot of people will use these vanity presses. I had a friend of mine who signed with one of them and was all excited his first book was coming out, and then when I tried to explain to him, that's a vanity in their press, and they want you to buy their book, your own book, at $7 a copy to resell, and you're not making any money, and you're never going to make any money. And it was a slap in the face for him, but all he had to do was Google it. All you had to do was look it up and see all of the complaints and all of the problems with it. And I think people are just new authors are just so excited that their book's going to be published and this is not going to happen to them that they just jump right in and they will sign anything pretty much.
And that's what's sad, because then they get locked in to spending thousands and thousands of dollars they'll never recoup.
No.
Or
they lose a book, or they've signed a 10-year contract or a 5-year contract with a company that when you really read the contract, it basically says, here's a 5-year contract, but we can auto-renew it every year as long as the book is in print. And that language wasn't struck from the contract.
Or they will come back to you and say, you can buy the rights to your book back for X amount of dollars.
Yeah, that happens a lot too.
Yeah, there's several vanity presses out there that do that. We'll publish your book for you. It won't cost you anything. We'll lock you into a 7-year contract. But if you want your book back, you have to pay us X amount of dollars, and we'll release the book to you.
Yeah.
And that, I see young authors who say, well, but they promised me this. Well, did they promise you they would market your book? What do you mean? Did they tell you they would market the book for you? But aren't they supposed to? No. All they do is publish the book and charge you to publish the book.
Yeah.
And then you have to buy thousands of dollars worth of books that you'll never sell.
Yeah, and that's the problem. And that's how a lot of authors come in and they get disillusioned because they didn't read a contract, or they were just so excited that they were going to do this that they just jump in and then the attitude is, well, I'll just write another book. Yeah, but you've already put that one. You've already spent a ton of money, and you've already screwed yourself. And now you got to hope you're going to make some of that money back by another book out there. That's not how this is supposed to work. Money's supposed to come to us, not the other way around.
Exactly. Now, have you in your travels by someone that says, I'm an agent, let me have your book?
Oh yeah, I've had a couple of people who have. I had one woman who found me on Twitter and started sending me messages, and when I asked for a website, she didn't have one, or then she worked for an agency. Well, who have you dealt with? Oh, a lot of big names. Well, give me those names. Well, sign with me and I'll give you those names. Well, no. I want to be able to talk to people. It's the same thing with signing with a publisher. Look and see what books they've released recently. Not, it's great, we reprinted a Stephen King story. Well, who cares? Who are the authors they're working with now in the last 3-4 months that have been released? And then who are the people that have done multiple books with them or been out, the book's been out a year? Talk to those authors. Same thing with agents. Who are you representing? Well, I want to talk to those people. I want to have conversation with them to see if it worked or not. Find out who they used to work for. Why don't they work for them anymore? I mean, do some research, and you'll save yourself a ton of headaches.
And another thing that I have found, of course, you've known me long enough that I go against the grain simply because I make my own rules and then I break them. But when I first started, I was told, Yvonne, you're an indie author, nobody will buy your books. Really?
Yeah.
Indie authors are not important. Really?
No. Well, when I, what's funny is when I started a long time ago. Indie author, that was a horrible thing. That was the mindset. The mindset was you self-published or you put out your own book when it was available, is because that's a crappy book that no publisher would buy. And thankfully, over the last 4 or 5 years, that mindset has changed. And there's a lot of great indie books out there or anything. But there's still that mentality. There's still that old guard. If you're not with a traditional publisher, if I can't go into Barnes & Noble and pull your book off a shelf, then you're not a real author. You still get that a lot. And you get that from authors who are still trying to hold on to that. And you get that from publishers who are still trying to make money off of that. That used to be one of my bucket list things, was to be able to go into Books A Million or Barnes & Noble or something, go to when they used to have a horror section and go there and envision, okay, my book is between this author and this is where my book will be. And I used to do that all the time. And now it's like it's not a big deal if my book is physically on a shelf somewhere. I mean, I get a kick out of it. Local library has a bunch of my books, and I think that's funny to go in there and see your books on the shelf. And a couple places down in Flagler Beach have my books, and there's a great clothing store up here, Subculture Corsets and Clothing, in Jacksonville at the Avenues Mall, and they carry my signed books there, and it's cool to go in there and see my books on display and stuff, but it's not the be-all, end-all that it used to be.
No, because the Internet has become our friend. And this is what I tell new authors. Make the Internet your friend. You don't have to be in a brick-and-mortar store anymore.
Yeah.
I have. If you pull up my name, my books are in places I've never heard of before. It's a whole new world out there, and what we have to do is embrace the newness of the internet. I can remember when we first started, and we made Facebook and MySpace our marketing tool. You did not see a traditional publisher on MySpace or Facebook when it came out. It wasn't done.
No.
And it's like all of a sudden, when they saw the responses and the things that we were doing on Facebook, all of a sudden, here they come. They're up there. They start interacting with the readers and putting new books up and Twitter and yada, yada, yada. But who were the pioneers in that? It was us indies.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We're the ones that showed the Big Six how to do it. Of course, the Big Six probably hates us for it, but that's okay, too. We don't care.
That's fine, yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about rejection. And
do we have to?
Well, yeah, because it's all part of it. Sadly, we do. Rejection in the publishing world, like I said, I got enough rejection letters I could wallpaper my house with it.
Yeah.
One of two things will happen. Rejection will either make us stronger and more determined, or it will do sadly like that young author who we got to get a hold of and make her not want to live that dream. So in my eyes, she has allowed someone to steal that dream.
Yeah, I mean, she's worried about she's putting the cart before the horse on that one. I mean, just don't worry about all that. Just put it out and just do it. Rejections suck. I mean, right in the beginning when I used to get them, and back in the day, back in the 90s, when they were form letters that were actually mailed to you, and you would have to rush out to the mailbox every day and grab another stack of rejections, and it would kill you. But as an author, you start to get to a point, I saw definitely a trajectory of I started to get more personal rejections instead of just a bunch of boxes checked on a form letter. It was, I like the story, but this didn't work, or that didn't work, or this was unbelievable, whatever. And some actual notes in the margin, or some actual editors who were actually typing a letter to me and saying change this or change that. And it helps you to rewrite that story or to use that for future stories, whatever you're doing. And it started to build that way for me because my stories started getting better, because my storytelling started getting better, because it's the first million words you write or whatever you throw in the garbage. And
Stephen
and I was
King's a
lucky
prime
that
example.
and I was very lucky that I when I came up was when we were still doing snail mail and before the internet and all that, and I wrote some really horrifically bad stories that will never see the light of day, but it was it allowed me to write and to get beat up about it and to realize what I'd done wrong. And unfortunately now, you talk to a lot of authors that basically just say, yeah, I decided I'm going to write a book, and they write a book and then it gets published, 2 weeks later.
Uh-huh.
And that's out there forever. And if it's a bad book, anybody can buy it and anybody can read it, and it's always going to be out there. And you really need to learn your craft. You need to read a lot. You need to write a lot, and you're going to get rejections, and that's just part of the game. And I don't know any author, big or small, that has ever said, "Oh yeah, so I wrote my first 50 stories all got accepted, and now I'm I've never had a rejection, and I'm hanging out on my yacht now." That's not normal. That doesn't happen. And
it never
when I moved when I moved from New Jersey to Florida, I literally had an entire drawer of a filing cabinet that was filled with rejection letters. And I wanted to to take some of them with me as like a remembrance, and I said, yeah, and I ended up throwing them all out. And but it was a big part of the learning curve for me, and it needs to be. You need to get rejected. You need to get knocked down that peg and go, okay, you know what? It's going to make me hungry, and it's going to make me want this more, and it's going to make me write a better story. And I think that's a part of it. And then you get to the point as an author when you are writing, you know, maybe in the beginning 10% of your stuff is actually getting published. And then you flip it, and you're, you know, I know 9 out of 10 of my stories is going to get published now. And then you start getting invited to anthologies that aren't even open to other people because editors like your work, you know, publishers like your work. That's how I got involved in the Hollywood stuff, because the publisher, they loved the work that I was putting out then. They loved my storytelling. And
that's how I got invited to. That's how I got invited to Investigation Discovery with that Most Evil Sexual Deviants, was because of that true crime.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ladies and gentlemen,
I remember being excited. My wife watches that channel religiously. Like, that's the only channel she watches. And I remember that episode. I had no idea that you were on. And I remember going, wait a minute, I know her.
You did not. We put it out everywhere. I can't believe you didn't know it was on.
No, I didn't know it was on. And actually, we just happened to watch, because we watch every single one of those shows. And I was like, first I was like, well, how come that name looks familiar, and how come that face looks familiar? And wait a minute, I actually know her. And I thought that was hysterical. Trying to explain to my wife how I'm like, no, she's also an author. You know, trying to explain to her. It was funny.
That is funny. That is too funny, because I thought everybody in God knew about it because we put it out there so much. Well, I got so tired of rejections, and so when I self-published on my own for a long time, and then a girlfriend and I just said, okay, watch this. We just started our own publishing company.
Mm-hmm.
And dreams can be made real. You just have to do it. This is what I tell everybody that I talk to. No one can steal your dream without your permission. Think, Armand, had I let all those rejection letters stop me, you would not have seen me that night on Investigation Discovery.
Yeah, exactly.
It does happen, ladies and gentlemen. It happens. I'm telling you, you can make your dream real. Do not allow anyone to steal your dream.
No, and it's not an overnight, you know, which is funny too for me, because, you know, some people that put out that first book and they start making a ton of money. And you know what? Hey, congratulations to you. I'm glad I had the career path that I took, because I think I enjoy it more now. You know, I always tell the story of being with, I was living with somebody who hated me writing. I had just lost my job, and we were renting a house that the landlord was trying to get rid of us because he wanted his house back. So he had turned the water off. She decides, I'm going to leave. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm basically going to leave you and your son high and dry. So she moves out, and it was like a movie. She's literally walking out the door when I got the phone call from this company saying, we want you to write books for us, and we're going to pay you a lot of money to do it. And as I'm telling them, as I'm talking, I could do this, and I do this for a living, and on and on and on, my son is walking past me because he had to scoop out water from the swimming pool to pour it into the toilet in order to flush the toilet, because none of the water is running. And he just looks at me and shakes his head, you know, like, I can't believe you're sitting there with a straight face saying, oh, I do this for a living, when I wasn't making any money, I wasn't doing anything. But I always look back at that, and I always think of where I was, you know, how low I was when I started doing this, you know, full time, and to where I am now, comfortable now, and I appreciate it more. And you just got to look at that. I mean, you got to just not, you know, you don't give up. If this is a passion, if this is, you know, nobody gets into writing to make money. It's like anything else. You get into this because you love it. You love the craft. You love all of it, and you have to, or you're crazy. And I think that's why we all get into this, and we do this because we genuinely love it. And if I wasn't making any money, I'd still be writing. I'd be writing for myself. I'd be writing to get these crazy stories out of my head before my head exploded. But it's much nicer to be able to buy a brand new car and to go on trips and to have money. I mean, that's much better.
But with anything that you do that is your passion, don't at the end of your day say, well, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a passion, whether it's writing, whether it's painting, whether it's drawing, whether it's making music, writing music, singing music, creating music, it doesn't matter. It's like Armand said, we as writers, we have to write. That is, even if we're not in front of our computer, we are writing in our heads. We can't help it. It's the same with any artist. So if that is your passion, do it. Because at the end of your day, it's not going to matter, except you're going to die with regrets.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got about 4 minutes, so I'm going to give you the last word until about the last minute, and I'm going to let you leave our audience. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my guest, radio host and author, Armand Rosamilia, and he is an absolutely fabulous author. You have to read his books. Green River Blend is one of them. And I'm going to give you the last word, my friend.
Well, it was awesome getting to talk to you. And we're both in Florida, so at some point we'll run into each other and get to hang out for a little bit. Hopefully that will be nice.
Absolutely.
And it was.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, it was just when you first talked about this podcast, I wanted to be a guest right away, just because I know you and I have a nice rapport together, and we're both, obviously, after talking for 2 hours, we're both on the same frequency as far as indie publishing and everything else goes. So that's always fun.
Yes, absolutely. Tell folks where they can reach you and about where they can reach your podcast.
You can find me on Facebook if you go to author Armand Rosamilia. That's the page. You can find me. I'm on Twitter at Armand Author. You can also find ArmandRosamilia.com, where I post everything. I am on ProjectIRadio.com. You can search for both podcasts, Armcast Podcast, and the new one is the Mondo Method Podcast. And that will be out September 7th. And pretty much you can find me everywhere else that there is social media. And send me an email, armandrosamilia@gmail.com. I answer any questions. I talk to people.
And Green River Blend 2 comes out when?
It should be out in October. Devil Dog Press is putting that out, so it should be, look for that in October. And also I am on Patreon, Patreon, and I do exclusive content on there, and you can subscribe for $1 a month, and you get to read my weekly, what I'm writing every week. I'm writing a Dying Days, a young adult novella on there. I do a new chapter beginning of every month. I put short stories that are no longer available anywhere else or written exclusively for the Patreon page. So check that out, too. Just search for my name.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting down to the end of our show. On Friday night, author Tim Ahrens will be my guest, and on Saturday night, the one and only Nicholas Grabowski. And any of you horror authors out there or horror readers out there know who Nicholas is. He is the one that made Michael Myers famous with Halloween 4. Armand, thank you so much, my dear friend, for an honor of being my guest tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. It was awesome.
And we'll have to do this again. And remember, ladies, remember all of you passionate people out there with a dream. As my challenged brother says, just do it. Don't think about it. Just do it. Because none of us get out of alive, And at the end of our days, we should have no regrets. We should always live our dreams. I can be found on Facebook. This podcast will go into archives on several different venues. iTunes is one of them. Mixcloud, SoundCloud, Podcast.cloud, Spreaker, and, of course, here at Blog Talk Radio, which is Off the Chain. Until next time, this is your host, Yvonne Mason, saying good night. Thank you, Armand.
Oh, thank you. That was awesome.
It was awesome. We got a lot of work done in 2 hours.
Yes, we did.
So as soon
I'll
as
have to have you on the Armcast.
Sweet.
When you get something. Let me
Well,
know when you get something new out, and then we'll do an interview for that.
All right. Well, Justice for Cindy's coming out sometime this month or next month. So that's the latest true crime. And
perfect.
It's awful. It was very hard for me to do. But this podcast will go live. I'll go into archives in just a little bit. As soon as it does, I'll let you know. And then it'll go and immediately go up to iTunes too.
Perfect. And then I'll share it. And I share it on Twitter like crazy because I got like 114,000 followers over there. So that usually gets everything out.
Mixcloud, SoundCloud, Podcast.com, and Spreaker. So as soon as I have to upload those manually, so as soon as I get those uploaded, I'll send you the links.
Perfect. All right. That's awesome.
Thank you again, my friend, and give your wife a big hug and tell her she's my hero.
I will, and give your husband a hug for me, too.
I will, my dear, and I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can be confusing. Like Swedish techno confusing.
Bark, bark, meow, meow. Dance with me, purple cow. Bark, bark, meow, meow. Ooh, you lovely cow.
Geico makes it easy. With 24/7 access, all you have to do is go to Geico.com and you could save money on car insurance. It just makes sense. Unlike,
Dance with me, purple cow. I like your moves.
I figured out who the neighbor around the corner is.
Oh, yeah?
I like him a lot.
Ooh.
He lets me talk as much as I want, is very simple, and has great plans.
Okay, I have to meet him.
Sure. Say hi. This is Metro PCS.
Metro PCS is in your neighborhood. Come say hi and get unlimited data, talk, and text for only $30 period. All on the fast nationwide 4G LTE T-Mobile network. Metro PCS. Wireless. Figure it out. Coverage not available in some areas. 1 gigabyte of high-speed data included. See store for details, terms, and conditions, and data management info.